All right, let's continue on with our review for today. Let's say, how's about them sentence diagrams? Let's talk about where those next 32 points are going to come from. So, majority of our points come from our diagrams because we spent the majority of our time learning how to diagram. And so, I wanted to look at 8 short diagrams. So maybe review the last 8, those last worksheets that we did in class would be really good to kind of review some basic diagramming skills for you. So that might be wise. Make sure your yellow notes are very clear and organized. All the posters will be available to you in the room, but the more you have written down for yourself, the easier these 8 will be. Let's just simply talk about what I would look for. Maybe make yourself a little checklist of things to say, hey, do I know how to do these? So from Unit 1, I really want to focus a lot on pattern 9 and 10. I think those are really interesting patterns that a lot of kids have never seen before, as well as what happens when a prep phrase goes up on a tree, when it's serving as an idiomatic expression, like the band sounded out of tune or the team was out of shape. So think about that. Unit 3, I want to focus on nominal clauses or a noun clause up on a tree, as well as gerund phrases. Right? So gerund phrases, which oftentimes will be up on trees as well. From Unit 4, I want to look at the adverbial infinitive, which is always underneath the verb. Sometimes it's in order to, sometimes it's just the word to plus the verb, and also an adverb clause where we join verb to verb with that subordinating conjunction like because or when. From Unit 5, this is a tough unit, but I want to go back to hit those adjective clauses. So I want to maybe find a clause that has the word who or whom in it. Maybe also a participial phrase and find that ing, which connects back to a noun. So consider that. What about Unit 2? I understand. Yeah, we skipped Unit 2 in terms of diagramming. We learned how to diagram in passive, and I'm not going to give you a passive diagram, but Unit 2 has so many verb questions. I put it in a completely different section on our final exam. So thank you, Alonzo. That's a great question, sir. All right, so let's talk about Unit 2 then. So could you recall the verb expansion rule? So I'm not going to give you the verb expansion rule on your final exam, so you might want to put it on your yellow paper and make sure you know how to actually use the verb expansion rule. So could you deconstruct and reconstruct verb strings? Also going back and forth between active and passive voice. So going back to Unit 2's quiz would be really beneficial for you. And do you know what E prime is? All right, so I'm going to ask you the question about E prime as well. So can you go back and explain to me what E prime is? So let's do some practice with this. So maybe try deconstructing these verbs and then checking your answer with my slides. So feel free to pause anytime you need to and test yourself. So if I was going to deconstruct the verb should have been studying, and I'll see if I can bring up my little laser pointer here. I'm not going to write it out for you, but I'm going to show you the answer. I'm going to use this verb expansion rule to kind of break down this verb, and that would give me the past of shall is should, have an en, be plus ing plus study should give me should have been studying. Might have cheated. All right, so once again, there's my verb string. Might is the past of may, so that's the starting point. So this is the past of may, have an en, and then cheat. Always your verb and your may in its base form, and that gives me might have cheated. Oh, I also ask you to reconstruct verbs. So if I glue this little structure together, which is the past of will and have an en, be plus ing plus dance, well, let's think about it. Past of will is would. Never have an en, never haven, but it's have. En plus be is been, ing plus dance. That should give you would have been dancing. Another one. Present of may plus be plus ing plus graduate gives us the present of may is may, not might, but may be graduating. And you might come across some of the weird verbs. And so make sure you know how to work with some of the weird verbs because I think they're fun. So what if I give you the present of have and en plus eat? I guess you'll get this one, which would be either has eaten or have eaten. It's pretty easy. It is easy. Thanks, Alonzo. Appreciate that. All right. What about this one? The present of have plus en plus swim. This one got us on our online quiz. The present of have is has or have, but en of swim goes swim, swam, and then into swum. Has swum or have swum. It's hideous, I know. Next one. Present of have plus en plus seek is either going to be has or have, and then the en of seek, just like the en of buying would be bought, the en of seek is sought. Present of have plus en plus bring would be the has or have, and then the en of bring should be brought. But if you want to say brung, technically you would be right. We talked about in the very first unit that the word brung is actually correct. We just don't use it anymore. And that was the difference between grammar 1, 2, and 3, that it's a word that really you could use, but we just don't for sort of linguistic etiquette or socially linguistic etiquette. But you could say brung. Changing from active to passive voice trips people up on this final exam. So make sure you're not one of those people who gets tripped up by this next section. I'm going to sneeze. I feel like I sneeze so many times in my videos. All right. So if I said Herbe performed a sock puppet opera of Wagner's The Flying Dutchman, and I want to change this into passive voice, remember how we did that? We take this verb performed and we increase it by 1 to change it into passive voice. The subject, Herbe, turns into a prep phrase with the word by, and we take our direct object and move it to the front. So there's always this crisscrossing motion of the front to the back to the front, and then the verb changes. So I would change this to a sock puppet opera of Wagner's The Flying Dutchman was performed by Herbe. All right, and you could say had been performed, but that wouldn't be the right verb. I'm only going to increase it by 1. Performed turns into was performed. And if I go backwards from passive into active, if I say a recount of Whitney's perfect exam score had been being sought by her disgruntled and jealous classmates, well, the by prep phrase turns into the subject. So classmates will be the subject. The subject goes back to the direct object, and then the verb decreases by 1. So if I have a 4-part verb, as I have here, had been being sought, I should have only a 3-part verb when I change it. Remember, the had should still be there. The ing should still be there. So there's certain parts that'll still remain. They just might move a little bit. So I'm going to change this to her disgruntled and jealous classmates had been seeking a recount of Whitney's perfect exam score. Highly encourage you to go back and review this on your quiz, on your practice quiz, and just in that unit in general. Make sure you're solid with going from active to passive voice. A lot of points there that traditionally people miss. And I want you to get as high a score. I'd love for you all to get A's, but you got to make sure you know your active and passive voice pretty well. E prime, so the question is going to come up like, what is this E prime thing all about? And so first off, E prime is not a thing, right? So you get no grammar crown for using that ridiculous phrase. Remember, the E prime, though, is a derivative. It's a variation of the English language in which all to be verbs are removed. Right? We got rid of all to be verbs. And that's why we have E prime, because it makes our writing more specific, sharper. It avoids false absolutes. There's all kinds of reasons why we might want to use E prime. All right, so I might ask you not only what E prime is, I might ask you to write in E prime, changing a sentence into E prime. All right, so if I said, I was angry that Chick-fil-A was out of vanilla milkshakes and was asked to order a chocolate instead. All right, so I want to get rid of these was's because that would be still an E prime. So I'm going to try to figure out how to get rid of to be verbs. So there's all kinds of ways of revising this. I might say, I felt angry that Chick-fil-A sold out of vanilla milkshakes. So the cashier asked me to order chocolate instead. Trying to find a way of rewriting it so I don't use a to be verb. All right, so see if you can practice that skill. Okay, that's all for today. There's plenty more for us to look at, but I think that's plenty for review day number 1. I would encourage you to gather your old quizzes, your old practice quizzes, maybe those last diagram worksheets which we completed. Try to get yourself organized. Maybe look at your yellow notes. Decide if you need to polish them or add to them or rebuild them. All things you can certainly do to get ready for this final exam. And you might need to add a little bit more to those yellow notes. Maybe some simple ways of understanding how to use punctuation or also these pronoun rules we had recently if you need to sort of simplify anything. Next, we'll look at multiple choice questions on our final exam tomorrow.